right. Well, I am Amanda with Thank You, Corinna. I appreciate you. Thank you, Dimitro. Okay, so we're really excited for this webinar. OrderEase is a really cool partner that focuses specifically on manufacturers and works really closely with them and helps them become better businesses. So they come forward with a plethora of knowledge. So over the next hour or so, we're going to be reviewing and unpacking what order orchestration really means. So settling the question of whether it's a legitimate competitive edge or just another term that gets thrown around. So before we get started too, I want to thank Sexton because Sexton's a really big supporter of our webinars. And I'm going to let Paul and Kyle, I'll let you guys take it away.
Awesome, thank you. So let's get it all teed up here and we'll dive right in. Awesome. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Kyle Minarsky. I am the Senior Business Development Manager here at OrderEase, and joined with me today is my colleague Paul Neff, our Director of Partner Development. Between the two of us, we're going to cover a lot of the supply chain. Myself on supplier and distributor go-to-market, and Paul on the LBM side with a very deep ERP and industry background. Just some really quick Coles notes. I've been with OrderEase for over a decade now. Originally a project manager, moved into more sales and sort of, I'd say a bit of consulting, ergo the topic for today, and just been super excited to sit down with you folks again and talk about order orchestration.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. My name is Paul Neff. I've been with OrderEase for almost 3 years. Most of my experience is actually in the point of sale background. I work with companies like Epicor for over 20 years. So we are working to help vendors become better trading partners for the customers and help unite the industry.
Awesome, Paul. So over the next hour or so, we're going to tackle something that gets thrown around constantly right now. It means something different depending on who's saying it, and that would be order orchestration. So just some quick housekeeping, about 30 minutes or so, maybe a bit more. And we'll leave a couple of minutes at the end for some questions or comments or anything like that. You can drop anything into the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. And like we have done in the prior webinars, it will be recorded and available to watch it afterwards once it finishes. Okay, so order orchestration is one of the most overused phrases in the supply chain right now. And today we're going to tell you exactly what it means and of course whether it's actually worth your time. Very quickly, what we'll be covering today on the agenda is what order orchestration actually means, stripped of the vendor language, where the gap is between how orders arrive and how they're actually getting managed, why traditional systems fall short on their own, what it actually looks like when it's working, and of course, the business case. So if you're in operations, supply chain, or honestly, sales at a manufacturer or distributor, this session is specifically for you. So we'll dive right into it. So what order orchestration actually means. And let me start by giving you something most vendors won't, which is a simple, plain definition. So order orchestration, it's not a product. It's not a platform feature. It's an actual outcome and a simple one to define, a connected, consistent flow from order receipt till fulfillment or to fulfillment, regardless of how the order arrives. That is it. And what I've heard and what I've seen is this term gets stretched to mean everything from basic EDI connectivity to AI-powered routing engines. But for today's purposes, we're going to keep it operational. And as we go through these, there we go. So the three capabilities that actually define it. Number one is a unified intake. Every channel where you do business is feeding into one place. There's normalization. Every single order that you're receiving is validated and structured the exact same way before it even touches any of your downstream systems. And of course, there is intelligent routing. orders going to the right fulfillment path automatically based on the rules that you are creating, setting, and controlling. So why this matters now. Most of you added order channels reactively, or for what I've seen, working with so many different businesses. An EDI connection with a big retailer, an e-commerce integration, of sales rep app someone bought 2 years ago. And at its core, you didn't build a system, kind of started building a patchwork. And to be quite frank, someone on your team is holding that patchwork together with manual work every single day. So orchestration is about whether your infrastructure can keep up with how your trading partners want to work without that person sitting directly in the middle. And Paul, I'll
So
leave it
the
over to you.
gap, I want to start with a picture that most of you are going to recognize. 5 or 6 channels, one person in the middle. A mid-size LBM supplier or manufacturer today is probably receiving orders from 5 or 6 places at the same time. 3 to 5 major retail or distribution partners via EDI, a B2B portal, sales reps sending in orders by phone, text, email, or a sales rep app, some accounts emailing PDFs, maybe a buying group portal with its own format and its own requirements. Every one of those arrives differently. Everyone gets handled differently. And somewhere in the middle, someone is doing the translation. Here's what it actually looks like on the inside. An EDI order lands in a mailbox. Someone checks twice a day. Sales reps enter a spreadsheet that then needs to be rekeyed into the ERP. Sales rep orders come in by text and get entered by a coordinator. Email and PDF orders sit in an inbox until someone has the capacity to enter it. And no single person or system has a complete picture of what's actually open right now. A structural problem, not a technology failure. So what that creates is inconsistent processing times across channels, errors introduced at every translation step, no centralized view of order status, ERP data that's always slightly behind reality. I want to be specific about the ERP piece because it's something I've seen repeatedly. When companies tell me their ERP isn't delivering the efficiency they expected in this area, 9 times out of 10, it isn't the ERP's fault. The ERP is almost never the problem. The problem is what happens before the order gets there. The gap isn't a technology failure, it's a structural one. Most operations were built channel by channel, and nobody ever stepped back to look at what the whole process should look like. That's what we're going to talk about addressing today. So why traditional systems fall short? So the natural question is, why can't ERP, EDI, or iPaaS integration tools solve this? You've probably invested in at least one of those. Let's talk about what each one actually does and where each one stops. So what each one and each does and where it stops. So ERPs are built for processing, not intake. They're excellent at what they do, inventory, financials, fulfillment logic, but they're not designed to receive and normalize orders from 5 channels in 5 different formats. When an ERP vendor says their system handles orders, what they mean is once a clean, structured order is in the system, it will handle it very well. Getting it there is the biggest challenge.
So we've also got EDI. Now, EDI solves the structured data problem for the large trading partners. That's real and it matters, but it only applies to those specific partners. It doesn't touch your rep orders, it doesn't touch your portal orders, your email orders, and so forth. And EDI on its own doesn't normalize anything or route actual intelligently. It's more of a protocol. It moves data, in a defined format between two parties who've agreed on that format. And like, don't get me wrong, it is very valuable, but that's not a workflow.
So then we have iPaaS. iPaaS or integration tools are genuinely very flexible. They can connect almost anything to anything. The problem is they solve connectivity without solving workflow logic. You can pipe data from point A to B, but iPaaS doesn't know what to do with a non-compliant PO or a rep order with a missing price. It passes the problem downstream. Someone still needs to catch it in the ERP. The shared gap across all three, none of them are designed to be the point of intelligence for your order intake. They assume the order is already clean and they push the problem upstream to a human. So the real question, the question isn't whether your ERP is functional or your EDI provider is reliable. It's whether anything in your stack actually owns the intake layer, validating, normalizing, and routing before orders become someone's problem.
So what does it look like in actual practice? So let me make this concrete. When order orchestration is working, the operations team's job changes. They stop processing orders. That's more automated. And they start managing expectations. And that's a fundamentally different role and a much higher leveraging one. So here's what the intake layer is doing. It's receiving orders from every channel in their native format, validating them against your business rules, pricing, inventory, compliance, normalizing them to a consistent structure, routing them to the correct fulfillment path automatically, and flagging the ones that need human attention with enough context to resolve them quickly. So before, the ops team is downloading portal files, rekeying EDI, chasing rep submissions, correcting errors after fulfillment, managing chargebacks, and everything in between. And what happens after? They're clearing 3 exceptions in 20 minutes and moving on to work that actually requires their judgment. So 3 orders with 0 manual touches. Scenario 1, 11 o'clock. An 850 comes in from a retail partner. The system acknowledges it, it validates the pricing, cross-indexes the quantities against your current catalog, and passes a clean order directly down to your ERP before anyone gets to the office in that morning. Here's another scenario. A sales rep submits through a rep tool with live inventory and live account pricing, including the promotions. The order flows directly to your ERP with no manual touch. The sales rep gets a confirmation within minutes. What they quoted is what's on the order, and what the order says is what that finalized invoice actually reflects. In scenario 3, a buying group order arrives via their portal. The system maps it to the correct account, applies the right pricing tier, and routes it. There's no spreadsheets, there's no inbox, there's no coordinator sitting directly in the middle. Commercially, this changes a few things. You can onboard new retailers much faster. You can absorb more volume without more headcount, which seems to be the common trend that I'm hearing across the board across many industries. Your partners get visibility without even having to make a phone call to you. And you can actually grow without the operation becoming a bottleneck, which is, again, one of the major challenges that I'm seeing with these suppliers, distributors that are trying to scale properly.
So what does the business case look like? The ROI on this isn't theoretical. It shows up in 3 places that you can measure. Number 1, speed. In a manual operation, the gap between order receipt and ERP entry is often 4 to 24 hours, depending on what channel it comes from and who's available to process it. In an orchestrated environment, that gap is minutes, For suppliers whose retail partners measure PO acknowledgement time, this is directly tied to your vendor scorecard. Your customers are tracking this fill rate. Secondly, accuracy. Every manual step introduces error risk. That's not a criticism of your team. It's just what happens when humans are moving data at volume. When orders are normalized and validated at intake before they touch your ERP, errors get caught early. Chargeback rates drop. Invoice disputes are minimal. The margin you were losing to error correction and chasing down orders hits the bottom line. The third point, scale. This is the strategic one. A manual operation has a hard throughput ceiling. Add a channel, add work, grow volume, add headcount. An orchestrated operation doesn't work that way. The same infrastructure that handles 50 orders a day can handle 500. That's a fundamentally different growth model. And it's the one that lets you take on new accounts without wondering whether your ops team can absorb them. So, closing quote, from years working with ERP systems, I've watched companies invest heavily in ERP systems that never delivered the efficiency that they expected. Almost always, it wasn't the ERP's fault. It was that the order intake was never cleaned up. Fix the intake, and this part of the ERP investment starts to pay off. Order orchestration is not just selling something, it's a competitive advantage when it describes how your operation actually works.
And there's 5 key things in summary that I'll say that are the things you should keep front of mind and things that you should really remember when it comes to any of this terminology that Paul and I have been discussing today. So number 1 is orchestration has a plain definition. It's a unified intake, normalization, and intelligent routing. It's not vendor language. It's a description of how orders should be moving through your workflows, through your systems. The gap between how orders arrive and how they're processed is where most of the cost and risk in your operation lives. Most companies have actually never even mapped it out honestly. ERP, EDI, and iPaaS each solve a specific part of the problem, but none of them own the intake layer on their own. When orchestration is actually working, your ops team starts processing and starts managing expectations. And to be honest, that shifts compounds over time. And of course, number 5, the return shows up in 3 defined measurable places: speed, accuracy, and a growth model that does not require proportional headcount.
So to wrap it up, if you want to see what your order intake looks like mapped against this framework, we are happy to do a 30-minute diagnostic, not a sales call, a structured look at where the friction is and what it's costing you. The link will be in the chat.
And we're totally open for some Q&A. Potentially some starters could be things like how do you handle customer orders that are still sending them over to you by fax or email? And what's the most common mistake where suppliers are trying to build this out themselves if you've tried to attempt this maybe in-house? So if there's any questions, of course, you can throw them in and Paul and I would be happy to get to them as well. And if not, that's absolutely fine also.
I can go first. So I think one of my questions is, so here's an example. I'm tired. Okay. I've got a million things on the go. I'm running a business, I'm dealing with my marketing team, my HR team, my sales team, so can you walk us through the steps that a company would need to take to start looking after? Could they start? What's step 1 for them? If you can kind of simplify it, and then where would you guide them?
You were cutting out there. I'm so sorry for.
Oh gosh, it's my internet connection. Am I still cutting in and out?
No, you're better now. Just that last couple sentences there. So sorry.
I was gonna say, did you hear, what part did you hear?
Was it
Did
that
you,
where are the first, like the best places to kind of start looking and start thinking about this?
yeah, I think
For
it's
sure.
more like there's a lot of businesses that are overwhelmed. They got a
Yeah.
million things on their plate. They have so much to do, where like this is a daunting task to take on something this big. So what are some like big, like bite-size things that they can work on, or that you would suggest? Like where do they start?
I start, in my personal opinion, and usually where I start when I'm meeting a client for the first time, is I'm just asking them sort of where, first and foremost, like where are you doing business? So, are you working with the independents? Are you doing business on Amazon? Are you doing any sort of drop shipping? Do you have a direct to consumer presence? And I start trying to map out like what are these major buckets that you're actually doing business in? And from there, I start asking questions like, well, kind of what's the fastest growing channel that you're in? What are the ones that are, the ones where you're receiving the most orders? So they can start kind of building these major buckets of like, this is where we get the most traction. This is where most of the volume comes in, and just sort of build a hierarchy that way. And I just start getting them to think about, because sometimes there's a disconnect to like what's actually happening. Like what's the process that's happening for each of these? Because sort of like we alluded to, there could be different processes between them. And a lot of some of these directors that I talk to, or heads of certain departments, or if I'm dealing in like a sales department versus operations, or in finance, or dealing directly with the CEO, sometimes they're disconnected on like what's the in between. Oh, we do 1,000 orders in this channel per month, but and we make X dollars, but they don't know that we're spending 10 minutes an order on a $50 drop ship order, trying to get all the correspondence in and out between yourself or Amazon or to your shipment systems if they're disconnected. So the first thing I start thinking about is just start putting it on paper of like where are all the places you are currently doing business, and potentially over the next 6 months, if you've got sort of arrangements with new trading partners happening, is where you plan to be there. So that way I can say, here's where you are today, here's kind of the process, here's kind of how much time you're spending, because time is money and you can't get the time back. And then we start saying, well, what happens when you sign that Costco deal, or what happens when you get into Home Depot distribution, or you start doing their dropship program. And when they can start seeing that how it's starting to inflate, and like, well, we can barely keep up, we're super stressed with where we are today, we're a couple weeks away from receiving our first round of Home Depot, Lowe's orders. And I just simply say, how are you going to keep up with that? Oh, well, we've got hirings happening. And then that's where I start building this business case. So as I digress a little bit, it's really just mapping out where are you doing business today and how are you doing it? And from there, that's where Paul and I can step in and start, really poking out to say, okay, that's where that problem is in that channel. That's where the time suck is on your dropship business, where you can't be manually managing, a $10 Christmas ornament through Wayfair or something, and doing 500 of them, and having Susan in the office just spending her full day keying in $10 dropship orders. So it's just, again, thinking about those buckets, the time that's spent, the volume there, and start building out your framework to say what's the most painful channel that we're in, and then we can start building sort of a roadmap around that to say how can we free up potentially hundreds of hours.
Well, the
Well,
other thing to look at is look at your current tools. Are your current tools being utilized? So I might have a portal, but if I'm only seeing 15 to 20% of the orders coming through the portal, there might be a disconnect between what the dealer's looking for and what I'm offering. It might be something like bookings are not handled through the portal. It might be freight rules are not handled through the portal. It could be promotional items. Everybody can get pretty creative when it comes to promotions. So a lot of the technology out there today allows for these promotions on the retail side. The point of sale systems are built for this, but they don't necessarily exist on the purchasing side and on the vendor side. So those types of things are worth some discussion as well.
well, and I'm supposing I guess you need someone to champion this project, because I almost wonder like how many companies actually know their processes in and out. Like you'd probably have to sit with each department and sit there and be like, okay, what are you actually doing? Because as a salesperson, it's easy to just be like, hey, you guys deal with it, you fulfill it, figure it out, right? Like you're like, I've
Yep.
done my job, you're done, right? And you pass it on. But yeah, that seems so. Like, who would you recommend being someone that would champion something like this to start looking at the processes for looking, or I guess it's really buy-in from every single department is what's going to be required, right? Because you're going to need, you know, accounting, procurement, you're going to need fulfillment, you're going to need your plant manager, right? So how do you recommend getting that buy-in, and where do you recommend, or who should be championing this project?
From my side, in my experience, what I typically like to see happen is definitely a leadership or executive or C-suite, someone that's been there long enough in the, let's say, operations side. Maybe they're managing the order desk, they're managing the ops teams because they know sort of the playbook of where these orders are coming from, who are their key accounts that are frequently sending orders in. If we're definitely engaging with any type of sales team or with any type of, you know, rep experience that we're creating, I definitely want to get a leadership member from sales. And those are usually two of my core people that I would be starting with, or core groups, is operations and sales, is because sales has the vision. They're kind of the tip of the spear in a lot of ways. And out there in the field doing, you know, the legwork, but operations is picking up all the pieces after the fact. So if I can create some unity between both sales and operations, just like there is typically within a business, marketing, sales, and ops are very much kind of aligned. I like to get those two perspectives so I can hear kind of from both sides, and I can kind of find that middle ground that says, here's how we can kind of connect you both. This is what's going to benefit the sales team, depending on what project we're talking about. Here's how it's, whatever project it is, how it's going to monumentally and positively impact operations. And then I can start feeling the temperature between those two groups. Because then we've got a really solid use case. Because like you said, a solution like this positively affects, you know, logistics and warehousing. It positively affects operations, the order desk, sales and marketing, and of course the CEO and CFO and potential CTOs of the company. They want to understand kind of like, well, how is this moving our company forward? Obviously, it's benefiting the departments, but are we taking steps forward? And are these leaps and bounds that we're moving forward as well? And is there sort of incremental steps? Because one thing I've heard also is, you know, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And that was kind of a bit of the framework of one of the last webinars with you folks I hosted as well, was that you just got to start thinking of what's that first step. And that's always what I like to bring to the table, say, you know, here's a very conservative and reasonable step that will move us in that direction to get to that final, you know, stage of where optimistically you want to be.
For
Kyle,
sure.
we have a question from Jarrett.
Mhm.
Do you have any horror stories of particularly bloated order channels that show the worst case scenarios before tactics like these get implemented? So from my standpoint, we have a bunch of stories of businesses that have had to kind of stall their sales because they weren't able to handle enough order volume operationally to increase their sales. So I think that's probably the biggest horror story. But Kyle, you've been here longer.
There is one exact, like, first one I thought of, and it was kind of, I alluded to it in a product that I mentioned through one of my points there. There was this massive Christmas ornament producer out in the United States, and they were doing like thousands of orders every single month through all these different channels that someone was actually logging into, and having to manually facilitate. It got to the point that they actually were getting traction from all these different trading partners that wanted to do business with them, kind of like Paul was alluding to, but this is an actual real situation. And they had to say no to multiple trading partners just because they're like, we couldn't keep up. It was a funny time for hiring as well, or just maybe some retention there. They had some really core people, been with them for like, you know, over a decade. But they just couldn't find the right people to sort of come in, learn the processes, because they had so many different ones. So again, turning away business. And just another little funny anecdote. I was doing business with this luxury cat condo manufacturer out there in Miami, Florida. Like, love those folks to death. Super cool product. They had a really tough time as well trying to find the right people to come in. And I think one of the core things, and their CEO actually showed me on some of our first video calls, was they had a binder, and the binder was like a mile thick because they were so versed in like Chewy and Amazon and Wayfair, and they had independents, and they did, you know, drop ship, and they did with distribution partners all across the board, Costco. And the binder was basically color coded by channel. And they handed it to their ops team or any new hire that says, if you get an Amazon order, flip to section 3.2 in the binder. And it was like 5 pages of start to finish notes on like log into here, download it from there, double check that the quantities are right, make sure the pricing on the PO was right, take that to our ERP system, key it in, then I'll go to ShipStation and start keying all that in, then bring the ShipStation data back to QuickBooks, now go back to the port. It just went on and on and on. So I joked with him. I said, listen, I'm going to turn that binder into a 1-page flyer for you. So he had a good laugh, haha. And then, yeah, we started connecting all those channels for him. So just kind of 2 examples or some horror stories: turning away business, or the dreaded binder that ops had to sort of follow.
Well, I'll say that the future is definitely moving towards vendor direct model. There's only so much space in the warehouses. Everybody fights for the space in the warehouse. It's always been the way it worked. But now independents are making decisions on which products they want to display in their stores, on how easy it is to do to get the product into their catalog, into their system. And it's definitely maneuvering that way, where vendor directs are starting to take a little bit more of the piece of the pie. And even the buying groups are starting to think more along vendor directs, again, because there's only so much space in the warehouse.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? We'll open it up to the group. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming, everybody. We really appreciate it. Stay tuned for our next webinar. We have one on cybersecurity coming up. I know we have another one with OrderEase coming up specific to manufacturers as well. And then, of course, we have our events. We have our BC golf tournament next week. And then we're in golf mode, actually. So it's Manitoba and it's in Saskatoon as well. And then, of course, we actually have, if you're in Edmonton, we have a professional development session on leadership. So look forward to seeing you guys at some of our events. And Paul and Kyle, thank you so much for all this information. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks. All right. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.